Now, speaking of inspiration, we have an amazing speaker coming up in just a moment. It is Dr. Stanton Hom, and he is a phenomenal man doing great things. He's the founder of Future Generations and the host of Future Generations podcast. He is a freedom advocate, a freedom fighter, and an absolute legend. Again, all the way from the US of A. We want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Stanton Hom for joining us. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, man. It's so good to be here. Genuinely appreciate the opportunity.
Mate, it is absolutely our pleasure. We want to say a big thank you for joining us. I'm going to leave you to inspire the world right now. My friend, go for it.
So my name is Dr. Stanton Hom. I'm a prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here in San Diego, California. I am the host of Future Generations podcast, clinic director for Future Generations Clinic Chiropractic, and the host of the Heart of Freedom, which our next live event, which we expect to have over 2,000 people here in the crazy state of California, San Diego, California. We expect to have 2,000 people live in person with an amazing event, just like what you're hosting, Andy. It's an amazing opportunity for us to do that. And at the end of the day, what else do we have at this time, right? At this time, what we find ourselves in is a space in what many are calling the civil rights movement of our time. And the reason why I think this is so critically important is my family chose to emigrate from China on one side of my family, Taiwan on the other side of my family, from and fleeing essentially nationalist, oppressive China. And at the end of the day, they found themselves in California, and it's crazy. They emigrated here during a time that was called the Chinese Exclusionary Act, where Chinese people were determined, essentially during the time, less than, how the civil rights movement in the United States was, even less than Black people at the time. And so at the end of the day, for us, why did they choose? Right? Why did they choose America? Why did they choose freedom? And what were they fleeing from? And what they were fleeing from is exactly what we are seeing become normalized, paraded, and celebrated in today, called more responsible, more safe. And for me, it's about this little one right back here, right? Sorry, I'm trying to figure out this whole camera deal. My kid, right? My kid is 2. I remember the beginning stages of the whole lockdown here in California in the United States. She was 7 months old. And I remember at the time that my office, like many of us who are brick and mortar practitioners, amazing natural healers who have been speaking out about a lot of this for a long time, she was 7 months old. And at 7 months, she was barely doing, tummy time, barely sitting up, and she was playing with a little abacus. And I remember sitting there thinking, because we didn't know what was going on, although I'll get to it, I feel like I knew very early what was going on. I sat back and I had to ask myself a question, which I hope you all ask yourselves the same question, is, with this being my second home, my office, my clinic, my second family, what world is my kid going to inherit from me? Like, what world is she going to be normalized into in my own place of business, my own private practice, my own place where we could either let in these mandates, which in the United States are 100% illegal in terms of EUA products, in terms of the whole aspects of literally looking at the law, when they are illegal and they are normalized, it becomes this moral ethical dilemma that I was taught in my undergrad, which was the United States Military Academy at West Point, which was there at some point you're going to be faced into this moral ethical dilemma where literally you're going to have to choose the right path, although it may not seem exactly in that moment what is actually right. And at the end of the day, it was clear to me that in my place of business, there was no way that I was going to let in a single, not one aspect of the mandate, because my kid was going to come into my place of business, her second home, our second home, and there was no way that anybody outside of me and my wife and our family, collective family in our place of business, that was going to determine her future. And so what we realized early on, And I want you to recognize this, because I'll be honest with you. I'm really, if you don't follow me yet, I'm pretty spicy, been deleted twice, totally shadow banned 2 other times on Instagram. I'm on my 5th account. And the reason is because I think I'm speaking very closely to the truth. And I was sitting back and one day I walked in with a mask and I said, I used to ask, do you need me to wear this? And it was the first time that I ever asked that, and people would take their masks off. In a progressive county, in a very, very much follow the rules type of county like San Diego, 80% of the patients took them off, and no one that kept them on actually said, yes, I want to force you to keep it on. That was a litmus test for me, and that's all I needed to know, because I realized, and I see this now, because I see other doctors, I see other people who are still playing some of the games out there, and they're still like wondering, how do you get to a place where you can actually just be yourself around these people? And what I found out was this: unless somebody's militant, like super militant on the opposite side, they don't want it, and they don't want to force you to do it. They think they have to. But I realized that there could be 2 people literally standing side by side each other, literally side by side each other, too afraid socially to take that leap and say, like, do you, like this whole conversation, weird dance. And I believe the reason why we're having this rally, and why Andy reached out to me particularly, is because this is something that I know for a fact we will never be able to separate from the future health of our world, especially with our kids. We specialize in birth, in pregnancy, chiropractic, and giving people informed consent around the birthing process, having them hopefully inspire in their circle, and empowering a transformative, a radically natural and normal physiological birth process, a magical postpartum that helps transform this maiden into mother. And in that state, babies still, because birth is traumatic, right? Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. In the most peaceful birth. Since the 1870s, it's been documented that there's birth trauma with kids and babies and newborns. Modern literature shows that 100% is going to have some sort of cranial upper cervical interference pattern. 96% are going to have a lower back lumbosacral issue, and then 91% are going to have something in the rest of the spine, which is the main conduit into the function of the whole nervous system and brain, which is the main self-regulator of every system in the body. And what we know before all of this was that we were already in crisis in the United States. I don't know the numbers everywhere else, but I know it's not that different, where we have normalized in the United States that 54% of our children express some sort of chronic illness, which some people might call a comorbid condition, which on average, the people who perished with or from COVID had on average 4 comorbidities, right? We have normalized in our children, more than half of them are going to express some sort of chronic problem, where when you go to the conventional pediatrician, oftentimes they will say, they'll just grow out of it, which I call the worst prognosis that you could ever give a parent, because parents usually are saying in their heart, like, hey, something's off. And I know something's going on, but I don't know exactly what it is. Let me go to the expert. And then the doctor will say, they'll just grow out of it. Let's check it out next year, another year of chronic problems. And so if we've already normalized more than half of our children having chronic problems, in the United States, 1 in 6 has some sort of neurodevelopmental delay. In the United States, 1 in 4 requires special needs or special education. And if you ask any teacher, any pediatrician, any speech language pathologist, any OT, PT, anybody in that world, they know this epidemic has been going on for decades, right? And if you look at the data, it's literally since 1986, 1989, 1981, where in the United States, that's when there was the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, which gave companies liability, which is a very key thing for today's world, because there's no liability for any of these shots. And why is this important? This is important because the problem was already bad. The problem was already overwhelming the system. The problem was already overwhelming the medical system. It was already overwhelming the school system. And it was literally already overwhelming families. And instead of just saying, wait till the next year, they'll just grow out of it. Sometimes those prognoses turn into, in that 1 year's time, you might have to live with this for the rest of your life. And to me, that's a story that I've seen in my office for 11 years. I've been in practice 10 years. And over the last decade, I've been providing informed consent, virtually every aspect of a person's life, especially children, especially birthing mothers, because at the end of the day, we already knew that life was already toxic. We already knew that life was already deficient of the most essential things that we know. Dr. Jamal Friesa was talking about, community, right? Things like that. But what's going to happen next is something that I've been speaking out to for a long period of time, where I've said this to my legislators and my local community and my local leaders, because I need them to understand this, and I need you to understand this, is what is becoming normalized today in our kids, not just that they have chronic problems that largely conventional medicine doesn't have answers for, but what's happening today is that kids' mindset are being normalized to believe that they're healthy, asymptomatic, sometimes wildly vibrant, healthy bodies can harm or kill someone else. And the reason why I think that is the most important aspects of things is because the opposite couldn't be more true. In that there's no other way onto the planet than the human gestational process that takes two half cells and the birthing mother's miraculous biology and energy and spirit can transform and transmute that baby from 2 half cells to 26 billion cells without conscious thought. Like, no mom really thinks like, today, liver. Let's make a liver today. Let's make hair today. Let's make fingernails and canine teeth today. I've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of moms in my own community, and not one has to consciously control that process. And then we become adults, and every 4 weeks you get a new liver, every 5 days you get a new stomach lining, every 11 days you get new taste buds, and no one has to consciously think about that. And so the wisdom in the body, the biological healing directive of our body, is far greater than we've ever been allowed to even fathom. And we're telling kids, we're programming in them, we're literally psychologically operationalizing in them that their healthy bodies can harm or kill someone else. I think it is one of the most nefarious belief systems that I could ever even imagine. And so we took a stand. And we took a stand early on, one-on-one, but also in our practice and creating a community where we just didn't mandate. We just said, you choose your way. Parents, you choose your way. My out was, I said, hey, clinically, 3 subsets of patients in my office should never, clinically contraindicated, not wear a mask. Kids with special needs, as I was describing, pregnant patients, and patients with a history of trauma. And every single one of my patients was fell into that category in some form or fashion. And it just gave them the freedom to just do whatever they wanted to, although we would let them do that anyways and let parents choose, right? But what we started to do was expand how that reach would then influence a greater community. And when we started our podcast, that's what we started to do, is attract people of like mind, where health freedom, natural living, specifically around natural birth, natural pregnancy, normal physiological kids, and self-healing, we could have those transformative conversations, which then expanded our network out further. When we got to a year ago, December, we were looking around, because we are by no means the biggest natural health practice, the biggest chiropractic practice, the biggest influencer in the area, but we started to think like, who's going to do an event? Who's going to do something that would attract to the world this message and literally throw our flag in the sand for our families, for our future generations in San Diego County. And we realized it was us. And so in the wake of, which for us in California, it's King Newsom, right? It's not Governor Newsom, it's King Newsom, self-appointed, just keep the state of emergency going forever Newsom. He just extended it to March 2022 because it gives him all his illegal powers. Okay, besides that, last year, 12/12/2020, we had an idea and we said, we're gonna just bring a live event to San Diego. Maybe we'll get a couple hundred people. Maybe we'll, inspire some communities. Maybe we'll just let people know they're not alone, right? And we thought we'd sell 200-300 tickets. We ended up selling 800. We ended up attracting 1,000 people. And I get stories and I get messages every day telling us that it was your event. It was your event that showed us that literally a nonprofit that is one of the most influential nonprofits in San Diego as a result of the last year is called Reopen San Diego. And they said we would never have met and ideated about what we could do if it wasn't for your event. San Diego Rise Up is one of the most citizen-based organizations that has created these massive rallies and demonstrations at our county supervisors meetings. And they tell us like, hey, like you've been such a big inspiration. Let them breathe, let them choose in San Diego and around the state has made such huge waves in going against the actual governor's mandate for like schools at home and then masks in schools and then now against the shot mandate. And she even attributes a lot of the inspiration from the work that we did also. And why is this important? Is it was just an idea. It was just something we were wondering we could do. And this year, what we know for a fact is it's not a mystery that we have Robert F. Kennedy coming to our event, Del Bigtree coming to our event, Sherry Tenpenny coming to our event, Kevin Jenkins coming to our event, Alex Zeck from Health Freedom for Humanity coming to our event, CVR over and over. If you don't follow him, the 11th reborn of the COVID V reactions account, which his original first account, just reporting the data and just reporting stories about people who've been harmed by the shot. 11 accounts. His original account was 152,000 followers. And he's just a dad. He's just a dad that has a vaccine injured child. And he just wanted to put the information out there. We're going to highlight also some of the stories of people who've been harmed. And why are we doing that? We're doing that because out of all of this, like you share one of those stories, you get a little shadow banned. You share something, you share a post, you get a little bit of a flag, right? What you may not know is that many of these people who've been harmed are the people they are literally deplatforming and trying to delete off the planet. Why do I care about this so much? My mentors have called this the civil rights movement of our time. My mentors, some of them who are Black Americans, say this is the civil rights movement of our time. And if we don't recognize that this is what we've fought for the last 60 years in our country to literally prevent and end forever, AKA segregation, then we need to start waking up right now. And so this event in particular, I want to show a glimpse of the conversations that I've had for 10, 11 years in my practice, knee to knee with parents, just wondering what they should do about shots, right? I called it for 10 years the most commonly asked and not asked question. Why? Because it's so stigmatized and people don't want to be dismissed, coerced, literally shamed, and manipulated in a pediatrician's office, so they don't ask the question. And now we've had these families for decades, like stuck in this spot, and many of whom have lost so many friends because they've chosen a particular thing for their child. But now we have this legion of individuals, which I could literally choke up right now about. Because when you look at something like VAERS and you look at something like, the over 800,000 reports just in the United States, plus 18,500, I think now, people who've lost their lives, that is just reported that could be 1% or 10% of the reports, but we know it's a hockey stick on the number of reports. And we see in real time these tech overlords, these media companies, these censorship gods shame, deplatform, delete, vilify, demonize, and deplatform these people. I feel like it is one of the most gnarly, nefarious forms of gaslighting that I've ever seen. And so I've wanted to, for a long time, just rehumanize all of us, right? Andy reached out to contribute. I would always, in my own mind and heart, the thing that I sat back and thought about was what I truly believe that I give that is unique. And the uniqueness of what I believe I give is this viewpoint of this birthing process, of this, like this whole procreation of life and the miraculous nature of what that is, and what normal states of health and physiology are actually wildly vibrant and optimal, which is very different than what is being normalized. That's one view of the world. The other view of the world is recognizing that today it is a fight for our inalienable rights. It is a stand in your power, not just in your truth, but recognizing that by just your existence alone, that you are free, that you are a free human being, just by the breath that you take in and the structure and the consciousness that you have, you are a free person. But also in that freedom, you have not only coded into your genes, plasticized habitually into your neurology, your neurophysiology, your neurohormone systems, your neuroimmune systems, this wildly vibrant potential to express the beauty of life now and for future generations echoing into the future. I believe that for me, in that entire process is also just the fact that we're all human. That the human spirit is biologically infinite in you. Thanks,
Dr. Hom, my man, thank you so much, brother.
Sorry, I could go on forever, man.
I've been so excited to see you speak. I really have. And you've been doing such a phenomenal job this whole time online. Your content and your message is needed. And so I want to say a really big thank you. And do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
I would love that, man. I could literally go on forever. So you could, I would like to be guided a little bit.
Awesome, my friend. Awesome. Look, you touched on so many really important points. And looking at this from a scientific point of view, looking at this from a doctor's point of view, I am a simple man, and I run gyms, and I love fitness and business. And of course, when we start looking into data and things of that nature, you know, we do look to the experts, and we look to people that do this for a living. But even a simple man like me can look at some of this data and some of the comparisons in numbers, etc., and think this does not make sense. And the messaging on the back of that from media, governments, etc., then becomes very confusing, very contradicting, and again makes zero sense. One of the things that has frustrated me is the masks conversation, and of course the ongoing medical conversation. And I think that everything has a place. Everything has a time and a place. But I would like to know the facts and the truth. And one of the things that I guess I'm curious about and can get frustrated about is the talk that the medicine and the masks stop transmission. And if you aren't doing those things, then the person who is not doing them is an evil, evil individual and a bad human being and selfish, and the words and the story goes on and on. I guess my question to you, my friend, is there proper data and science, any of it, proving that it stops transmission? Because I've seen some studies come out recently that prove that it hardly does. Is that correct?
I think with every mandate, there is an ability to manipulate data to show at effectiveness, right? That's a really important conversation. However, man, I don't like to go down that road too much, because if you really read all of the science, like the whole picture of science, there is no argument for any of the mandates, whether it's masks, whether it's lockdowns, distancing, whether it is shots, whether it's any of it, right? Except for what you can now follow, which is used to be follow the money, now it's follow the censorship, right? If it's being censored, it might work, right? It might actually be a key to what they're trying to hide, right? It's clear as day today. Where I, as a doctor who is bound by the Hippocratic Oath, which says first do no harm, sometimes we jump into the conversation around effectiveness before we've passed the first checkpoint, which is safety, right? And so when it comes to, say, any of these mandates, I mean, you read The Real Anthony Fauci by Children's Health Defense leader Robert F. Kennedy, and on page 19 of the preface goes through like literally one paragraph of all the data that says lockdowns harm, right? That there's danger, there's real outcomes and danger for them. And when you don't look and assess its safety, right, whether it's mask, lockdowns, distancing, isolation, or any of the other things, right, if you don't look at safety on those, then having a conversation of something works is not as important, right? And so this is, and I appreciate you saying that, Andy, about being more simple-minded and a gym owner. Some of the most inspiring people today that I know standing up are gym owners, because common sense ain't so common, right? And so when it comes to safety, and this is really important, especially for the thing, right, that they're mandating right now, the thing, the poke, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna make it as simple as possible, right? This is like a teeter-totter, right? In America, we call it teeter-totter sometimes, but safety and risk are inversely related. And so if safety studies have not been done in a holistic way and safety goes down to zero, then risk becomes infinite, unknown first. That's the best case. Unknown. We just don't know how risky this thing is. But it's potentially infinite, right? If you ever do math and zero is your denominator, that means the number is actually an imaginary number, but it's infinity, right? It's infinity. And the reason why that's important is if something has a risk factor of infinity, what does that mean common sense wise? It means that you might die. It means you might perish, right? It means the risk is unknown and infinite. And the reason why that's important is that's what's in your heart, Andy. You're in your heart, in your gym member mind. It's like there's something that isn't right here. It doesn't fit correctly. And if safety isn't done, or they're hiding safety, or they're unblinding the safety group, or they're short-terming, or they're saying, hey, this surveillance system isn't good because the data isn't right, it doesn't sit right in the back of your mind, because at the end of the day, you know that there's zero safety. And if there's zero safety, like I'll just give you one example for masks, because you use masks, right? By 3 months of age, babies, 3 months old, have a visual acuity, a brilliance in their soul, in their mind, in their brain, so acutely aware that they can see lips moving and be able to tell whether that person is speaking their native tongue or a foreign language. And so when a baby's born into the world and they don't see their mother's face, or they don't see anybody in their world, my kid doesn't know a world without masks. Tell me one person that has even tried to calculate the end game effectiveness of this, because to me, effective means all the things that it does. And when you only look at reducing transmission or preventing infection, then you might be able to whittle the numbers into things. But if you expand the word effectiveness or works into all the potential side effects and adverse effects, you get a better picture, man. And I believe that's why you know in your heart and why you're doing this. I'm inspired by you.
Thank you, my man. Look, I really appreciate it. Great answer. I've got one final question for you,
Yeah.
just out of my curiosity. And again, I want to say a huge thank you for joining us. But you mentioned the Hippocratic Oath, and an oath that doctors and healthcare professionals take on their journey. And I want to just give a shout out to all the doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals.
Yes.
I have so much respect for the work that all of you do. You change the world every single day with your actions, your thoughts, your care. So I want to say thank you. But one of my concerns, again, over this period of time has been the dismissal of agreed upon standards in regards to codes of ethics in the medical industry and things that we refer to keep us safe. Things such as Nuremberg Code, Helsinki Code over here in Australia, Immunisation Handbook, that clearly states that where there is risk, there must be consent. We cannot coerce people into doing or taking any medical procedure or substance. And the list goes on. And as we go through this list, we see that under the guise or the narrative of this emergency, what we've seen is that pushed away, dismissed, and unfortunately, people have suffered because of exactly this. I want to ask you this final question. What do you think the after effects are on culture and community now that we have dismissed the very thing that has protected our human rights in the medical space for years and years?
So as I said earlier, I'm a West Point grad. I'm a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Last year, I was really saddened when my 20-year reunion was canceled, right? And my common sense question goes like, well, holy hell, right? Like, these are the potential leaders of our next generation of military, arguably the best military in the world. And what if the enemy hasn't taken their recent PCR test, right? What if we don't know that they're negative, right? Will we then run in the opposite, like immediate retreat? We're not showing up for this fight and conflict. Like that's one thing, right? But particularly at West Point, we saw something that I knew was going to be normalized across many of the uniformed forces, which I believe is happening to the first responders today, right? And you gave a shout out to the nurses and doctors and the first responders. I think they are heroes, and whether they, heroes to villains, right? But heroes in my heart. What we saw was a level of coercion. We saw a group of cadets who were resisting and who were just standing by their constitutional right, their bodily autonomy, their personal sovereignty, but also just recognizing, I don't know if this thing is going to harm me. I should have a choice, right? And so in one of the classes, they put 32 of these cadets into a 9-person tent. So contradiction there, right? First off, you're supposed to be distancing. You're supposed to stopping the spread, but we're going to put 32 people in a 9-person tent, have no distancing, nothing so that's already one contradiction. But they had a medical officer, a colonel, full-bird colonel, walking in and medically coercing them and literally saying, I'm going to be the person that will plunge this needle into your arm. They then leveraged graduation, they leveraged schooling, they leveraged their careers, they kicked many of these cadets out, right? And so the reason why I'm going this way with answering your question is these are then going to be the young leaders who are responsible for leading a military group, right? Like, they're going to be the young lieutenants that have as a standard for their experience that you can be coerced, manipulated, and forced into a product, or they will leverage every aspect of your future and they will literally ruin your career otherwise. And when this becomes normalized into a generation of military leaders, into a generation of first responders, into a generation of doctors and nurses, which is 1,000,000% contradictory to every code that you had listed out that we have striven to fight for or fight against, right? I think this is one of those moments, right, where it may not come down to just that leader or that doctor or that person to help us, right? It's going to come down to that single individual recognizing that they need to stand in their own singular power for their own personal sovereignty, get that into their families, get that into their communities, build these micro communities of aligned people who then go into these organized areas to then unseat these politicians, which we have seen in California, of all places where you would not expect it. We have seen it work, and we know that we're just getting started. And we know it's because we have seen that literal contradiction and this lowering of whatever our human standard is, and we have no tolerance for that. And it's now time for all of us to raise our bar of what we expect, which the people of the past had it right, man. All those codes, it was exactly right for the preserving of the human spirit, but also the unleashing of our human potential.
So true. So true. My man, I think that contradiction point is terrific, because we need to be aware, be strong enough to see the contradiction and ask better questions around that. And then we can uphold the standards. We can fight for the standards that we deserve to fight for. Dr. Hom, I want to say a big thank you. You are an inspiration, my friend, and keep doing what you're doing. Where can our audience and our listeners find more of you?
It's hard to find me, but I'm only on Instagram. So Dr. Stanton Hom 5.0 is my handle. Thefuturegen.com is where you'll find us from a global perspective, from our podcast perspective. You have all the information on our Heart of Freedom events there as well. And then we have a community. We have an online, censorship-free, absolutely also free community, community.thefuturegen.com. And so those three areas are very easily in terms of how to reach me. And at the end of the day, if you're listening to this, thank you. And I'm honored that you're here, because at the end of the day, this is when you show up and then take this and elevate what you're being called in the existence you are meant to be. Elevate your purpose, and you will never, ever, ever have a hard day's sleep again, because your soul will rest.
My man, thank you so much. Again, appreciate your message, appreciate your spirit, and I appreciate your fight, because that's what we need. We need more people standing in their truth and fighting for what they believe in.
It's for my
now
kid,
it's not
man.
the time to be complacent, and you are definitely a man who is not complacent. Again, everybody head over. Link is on the screen, www.community.thefuturegen.com. Thank you, Dr. Hom. Appreciate you.
Love
Head
you
over
guys.
and follow Dr. Hom.
Appreciate you.
Fantastic leader.
This is a great program.
Thank you, my man.